Citizens Property Insurance. Whether recovering or preparing, Citizens is available. Claims can be tracked at citizensfla.com or reported by calling a live Citizens representative. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, AI disruption is impacting college campuses and the work prospects of graduates. We talked to UNF's new artificial intelligence czar about how the school is preparing and responding. Then, a local author unearths our weird historical past as part of a new speaker series at the architectural recycling store Eco Relics. And the city's former poet laureate tries her hand at stagecraft. We'll tell you about her new play. Join our conversation. Give us a call on air at 904-549-2937. You can also email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News, I'm Dale Willman. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is in Israel today, where he'll try to restart the Gaza ceasefire talks. He's also expected to look at the severe humanitarian crisis underway in the region. As NPR's Emily Fang tells us, he arrives as the major interested parties there push for any potential advantage.
Each side has been angling this week to put more pressure on the other. So we're seeing far-right Israeli politicians who've been discussing annexing Gaza again, moving Palestinians en masse out of Gaza if the hostages are not returned. Hamas has been putting out statements echoing criticism of Israeli restrictions on food into Gaza.
At least 48 Palestinians, meanwhile, were killed yesterday as they waited for food at a crossing in Gaza. South Korea's government and corporations are expressing relief after a deal was reached this week on tariffs with the U.S. NPR's Anthony Kuhn reports that without the deal, the U.S. would have imposed heavy tariffs on South Korea starting Friday.
President Lee Jae-myung said in a Facebook post that the deal clears away uncertainties for South Korea's exports to the U.S. and allows South Korean companies to compete on equal or better terms with other countries. The deal includes lowering tariffs on South Korea from the 25% imposed in April to 15%. South Korea pledged to invest $350 billion in the U.S. and purchase $100 billion worth of energy products. South Korea successfully resisted U.S. efforts to open its rice and beef markets, nor did the deal mention Seoul's contribution to the cost of stationing U.S. troops in South Korea. Further details of the deal are expected when President Lee Jae-myung visits the U.S. next month. Anthony Kuhn, NPR News, Beijing.
Brown University has reached an agreement with the Trump administration that will result in the release of research funding frozen earlier this year. We have more from NPR's Sequoia Carrillo.
Unlike Columbia University's recent settlement, the university will not pay any kind of fine to the federal government, but it will invest $50 million in grants over 10 years for workforce development in Rhode Island, a move that Brown President Christina Paxson says aligns with their, quote, service and community engagement mission. The school asserted that though there was no proven wrongdoing, they were willing to settle to fulfill legal obligations and get funding back for research in a timely manner. Brown University did not agree to any kind of government or third-party oversight, but will conduct a third-party campus climate survey as part of the deal. Sequoia Carrillo, NPR News.
Stocks in Asia closed mixed today. The Shanghai Composite dropped 1.2%, while Japan's Nikkei 225 rose 1.1% after the Bank of Japan kept interest rates steady. In Seoul, the Kospi edged down by 0.3. 0.1%. This is NPR News.
Good morning. This is WJCT News, 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It is 9:04. City Rescue Mission is asking the Jacksonville community for help restoring 3 of its transitional housing units that were damaged in a storm this week. The nonprofit agency, which helps homeless individuals get back on their feet, says a powerful storm ripped through, uprooted trees, damaged roofs, and left severe structural damage at its housing on the west side Tuesday afternoon. 7 people have been displaced from the damage. City Rescue Mission's executive director says the agency now faces an unexpected emergency to make those repairs. And if you'd like to donate, you can go to crmjax.org. NASA and SpaceX are set to launch a crew of 4 from Florida's Kennedy Space Center to the International Space Station today. Brendan Byrne reports.
SpaceX's Dragon capsule will carry 2 NASA astronauts, 1 from Japan and a Russian cosmonaut. It will be the first flight for Commander Zena Cardman, who was set to launch to the station last year, but was bumped from that mission to make room for NASA's Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams. The agency determined their ride to space, Boeing's Starliner capsule, was unsafe to return them. This mission's pilot, Mike Fink, will mark his 4th trip to space, launching previously on NASA's Space Shuttle and Russia's Soyuz capsule. The crew will spend about 6 months living and working aboard the International Space Station. I'm Brendan Byrne in Orlando.
Liftoff is scheduled for 12:09 this afternoon. If you want to check out that launch, it's going to be a hot afternoon. A heat advisory is in place from 11 this morning until 7 this evening for all of northeast Florida and southeast Georgia for feels-like temperatures up to 110 degrees this afternoon.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Kauffman Foundation, providing access to opportunities that help people achieve financial stability, upward mobility, and economic prosperity regardless of race, gender, or geography. Kauffman.org.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, AI is impacting human creativity, labor markets, even relationships. It's also transforming higher education. We ask UNF's new artificial intelligence czar how higher ed is embracing and preparing for the disruption. Later in the program, exploring Jacksonville's understory in an upcoming segment of Eco After Dark. But first, the unemployment rate among college graduates now exceeds the overall rate, and the trend is most dramatic in the fields that were until recently considered rock solid, like finance and tech. It's just one manifestation of the growing impact of artificial intelligence. Here to talk about it is UNF professor Dr. Josh Gellers, who was recently named the school's first faculty fellow for artificial intelligence. Good morning. Thanks for being here, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I am curious to start with just why the school created this position of a faculty fellow for artificial intelligence and what you will be doing in that capacity.
Sure. So I think, UNF sees itself as an important community partner that wants to be providing the kind of education and training that is necessary to catapult the region and workers in the region for the foreseeable future. And part of that is an acknowledgement that artificial intelligence is going to be about that journey, especially as we see the tech system here within Northeast Florida really kind of blossom. So inspired by the leadership of our president, Moaz Lamayam, and our chief technology officer, Brian Verkamp, there was a desire to make sure that faculty had a voice in that conversation and how it plays out at UNF. And I was fortunate enough, because I've been heavily involved in things like our generative AI working group back when, that was brand new, to our AI council, which has wrapped up its first year and is launching into its second. And so my primary function is going to be making sure that we're providing educational opportunities for both students and members of the community, and then also to help to develop policy around AI in higher education, represent the university in spaces where AI is being discussed, and we have some upcoming events on that note, and then also to help to continue the conversation among faculty about what they can do to address changes that are happening in their classroom and make sure that students are part of that conversation as well.
And so I'm curious if you can sort of assess where policy is going, because I feel like even just a year or two ago, the conversation around AI was largely how do we prevent its use? How do we detect its use? Now it seems a little bit more like a kind of lead, follower, get out of the way with
Mhm.
AI. And so perhaps the policies that you all are devising and implementing have changed.
So one thing that we've done is, in concert with our Office of General Counsel, among with other stakeholders within the university, is to look over with a fine tooth comb all of our existing policies and to identify the ways in which they could be impacted by artificial intelligence. And the idea is to provide guidance so that both community members as well as members external to the university can understand how these things intersect and what we are doing about them. That doesn't necessarily mean that we are implementing wholesale, completely new policies all over the place, but it means that we are trying to make our policy resonant and sensitive to the new context in which they're being enacted, and also to think about places where we might need new policies. And so I think before the session began here this morning, we talked a little bit about AI detection software and how our approach to that has been, because of the major trappings of using AI detection software, that our policy is sort of a way of saying to faculty, you can have your own approach within your classroom and with the courses that you teach, but we are not going to mandate anyone to use that in their classroom. In part because there's things like false positives, false negatives that are we don't want to get into the situation where we're becoming punitive and preventing faculty from being able to practice the sort of academic freedom that is intrinsic to higher education.
So, do you anticipate that faculty members will cease using AI detection software basically because they don't want to run afoul of the idea of a false positive?
I think that that's part of the hope, again, because what we would want to avoid is expanding the net that is going to capture a number of students who may be using AI for legitimate reasons. It's even more difficult when you think about the fact that people can use AI and then train it in their own speech so it comes off as if it's not AI. As a professor who's teaching class right now, I can tell you that I pretty much can spot it when I see it. But I don't want to start getting in the habit of accusing people using evidence that I think potentially could be faulty. So we don't want to, again, mandate that faculty do anything particular on that note, but we also want to protect the students and make sure that they're going to be treated fairly in this whole process.
So I want to ask you, I kind of mentioned in the intro there about how AI is impacting the labor market. And obviously that's a big deal for a college that is turning out graduates ready to enter the labor market. National unemployment right now at 4%. New college graduates, the rate is 6.6%. And a New York Times reporter recently called it a bloodbath for white collar workers, potentially. Can you kind of, first of all, talk about what conversations you're having on campus about how this is impacting recent grads and upcoming grads?
So the good news is that we have on deck events that are coming up that talk about the way in which AI is relevant to different industries, and they're currently in various stages of planning. We have representatives from the university in events like there's a TEDx Salon coming up. There's the Jax Tech Fest. So these are things that are going to be, where we're having those sorts of conversations. We also make sure that we touch base with faculty. Our AI council meets pretty regularly so we can hear from faculty directly what they're experiencing. What we want to do is work very closely with people in the local community, the business community, other industries, nonprofit, and so on, so that we are listening to their needs and that we are going to be providing training opportunities to make sure that our students are not missing out, while at the same time acknowledging that for certain entry-level positions, organizations are looking at ways that they can become more efficient, and that may wind up curtailing some entry-level employment. So what can we do on the UNF side in order to ensure that our students are AI proof and can actually, as we've called ourselves in the past, Jobs University, continue that legacy of providing the region with educated workers who are going to be, able to provide important inputs and skills and resources for all of the different industries that are present here in Northeast Florida.
I just want to frame it a little bit more because, there is this information that we're hearing from executives at Amazon and JP Morgan saying they expect their workforces to shrink considerably because of the impact of AI. The CEO of Anthropic, which is the creator of the Claude chatbot, saying that AI could eliminate 1/2 of all entry-level jobs in just 5 years. Um, and the executive at Ford saying he expects AI will replace, half of white-collar jobs in the U.S. as well. So these, you know, um, these are jobs that are often held, obviously, by people who've recently graduated. We're seeing that, whether it's an internship that is being supplanted by an AI chatbot or some sort of agent assist, or these early jobs. I'm curious, you know, do you think that your student body is cognizant of how severe the change is predicted to be? Do you also envision the change to be that severe?
So, I mean, you highlight a lot of great points there. One thing I'll say is, our students are busy. They're busy working and they're busy attending class. And so I don't know to what extent that has sort of sunk in that these are things that, as you mentioned, major CEOs of industry and tech companies are talking about and predicting. I'll say at the same time that, there's a tendency to, especially on behalf of the tech companies, to talk about things in very grandiose terms, where at this point, as you pointed out earlier, we do have evidence that there is this shift in the unemployment rate, albeit a small one, but a significant one. And the question is, what amount of those jobs are explicitly due to automation vis-a-vis AI? And the answer is we don't know exactly what that number looks like. But what we are doing is, I think, twofold. One is continuing to do the things that are really important that people only get when they go into college. One of the faculty members at one of our meetings that we had on AI said something that really resonated with me. She said, "I'm not interested in using AI, for writing, for instance." She said, "I want them to understand who they are and how they can express themselves, and I don't need AI to do that." And I think what we do at UNF is provide both a space for the kind of humanistic inquiry that is so important, finding out what kinds of things make people tick, allowing people to engage in creative expression, to write, to engage in the craft of learning, and at the same time making sure that when students are leaving UNF, that they are AI savvy, that they have the skills to succeed in those roles, even though some of them are changing in very important ways, as you noted. And so to that end, we've done things like, for students, we have 2 AI badges, one that I worked on, Intro to AI, another one on prompt engineering. We are working presently on an AI certificate, which is for a limited time going to be free for anyone, anywhere. That's going to bring people up to speed on what's going on with respect to AI across industries, across different functions, including ethical concerns and so on. And so we're trying to basically engage in this delicate balance between hanging on to the things that make college special and create knowledgeable citizens who are able to contribute meaningfully in the nonprofit sector, in the business world, in government, and so on, and also making sure that our graduates are able to contribute to an ever-changing job market where technology is rapidly changing what that looks like.
I want to take a listen to, there was an interview with Kevin Roos from the New York Times. He's a tech reporter there. He was recently on the Hard Fork podcast being asked about kind of how people in industry are interpreting and in some ways anticipating the loss of these low-level jobs. Let's take a listen.
I think the argument that they would make is that, some of these entry-level jobs were pretty rote anyway, and maybe that's not the best use of young people's skills. I think the counter argument there is like, those skills are actually quite important for building the knowledge that you need to become a contributor to a field later on.
About that, I think of even just starting out as a journalist, kind of how the early assignments you have are these very rudimentary roles that you might have. Somebody might, for instance, hand you a press release and say, write this up, make a couple calls. And so you're kind of doing this very basic type task. It could easily be done, one would argue, by an AI assistant. But it is also what gives you the experience, the knowledge, even if it's just making that phone call and kind of getting comfortable with having that interaction, or whether you're just starting out in finance and you're being asked to go through reports and, pull out information and make pitches about possible investments. Again, all that could be done by AI. But if you don't learn those skills, how do you get to be a middle, manager? How do you get to the level that people are going to be looking to hire if you don't have that basic entry level experience?
Yeah, that's a great point. And this is sort of a crisis of the middle, right? That how can you skip over those foundational aspects of learning on the job? Because you're going to wind up drying up the pipeline for mid-level and senior level managers and employees if there are no people at the lower rungs of that organization. So I think one way that we might see this play out is in a kind of backlash where a lot of those entry level jobs or some portion of those entry level jobs dry up, and then all of a sudden we have a dearth of people who are waiting in the wings to take up the positions from the people who are retiring or moving on to other careers and so on. And companies are going to have to kind of pivot back to going to those people who they need to train, whether it's through a kind of formal apprenticeship process or maybe re-envisioning what those entry-level roles look like. But in the race to capitalize on the efficiencies that AI can generate, we run the risk of overlooking these very important factors, which are going to contribute to the growth of organizations and their continued ability to perform their operations into the future.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking to Dr. Josh Gellers. He is heading up the school, UNF's new AI policy and, I guess, faculty advisory mechanism on artificial intelligence. And he is talking to us about, the impacts on campus and also in the job market. We're also going to be talking about some real life impacts that a lot of people are anticipating. But if you'd like to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media on Facebook, Instagram, or X at FCC On Air. We've got a call from Jimmy on the west side. Good morning, Jimmy. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Ann. Good morning, Dr. Gellers. I have to tell you, UNF has made the right pick. Your credentials are exemplary, Dr. Gellers. I'm curious, and I have a little bit of experience adjunct professoring on the side. You might say I'm a bit of an adjunct professor. I wonder how you and other professors are using these tools in your own work, either in instructional design or research or in the classroom. Just curious how you're seeing the impact of AI in your own work. Thank you.
It's a great question, Jimmy, and I'll add to that because I feel like a lot of us sometimes don't even know when we're using AI in our work because it has become so omnipresent. But if you can answer his question.
Sure. First of all, you're not a bit of an adjunct. You're an adjunct. You're working as a professor, so thanks for being part of the professoriate. There's sort of three different camps of faculty, right, that we think of. There's we call it the 20-60-20 rule. So 20% of the faculty totally dialed in, very interested in exploring how AI can be used both in research and teaching. 60% kind of trying to figure out whether it's going to be helpful to them, maybe a little bit gun shy and unclear what tools to use. And then 20% are pretty adamantly opposed and have no interest in it. And so we have to just recognize first and foremost that is kind of the state of academia at UNF, and in particular in my classes. I'm in that sort of top 20% that's really interested in tinkering and seeing what I can do with it. In the classroom, I can tell you that last year in the spring, I taught a professional development course for the first time, which was wonderful. It's for our new environmental science, Bachelor of Science degree. And at the same time, even though I've done things like this for a long time, I had never taught this particular course. And I was thinking, all this content is existing. I don't need to reinvent the wheel to teach students how to write a cover letter, which is going to be analyzed by AI anyway. So what I did is, I provided them with resources that were coming from, blog posts and people in industry writing about these sorts of things. But then for each module, I used a large language model to generate copy, basically like a script. And then I used 11 labs to digitally clone my voice. And I had every single module introduce that topic in a digital clone of my own voice. And what was really interesting was at the end of this, I had not disclosed this to my students. This was somewhat of an experiment. And but I let them know at the end that this is what happened. And I asked how it affected their trust in both me and the course. And the overwhelming majority of the students who responded said that it didn't really affect it. Now, what I did on the other side of it was in class. It was very high touch, very experiential. We had field trips out in nature. We had guest speakers from industry. We had simulations of professional ethics quandaries and all these sorts of things. On the research front, we're seeing now a movement towards, in some places, the acceptance of AI-generated material. In other places, it's still totally not permitted. I have never used it in my own research to, generate a research paper or anything. But when I have received reviews from other people on my work, I've asked an AI, system, where do you think I should incorporate some of their suggestions? And then I write in there. So it's basically an assistant that's helping me to work through some of the changes I need to make to my own research products. So, again, there's a lot of faculty who have very different approaches to this. I, again, are probably among that 20% that really do a lot. But I think we're beginning to see some really interesting ways in which faculty are beginning to experiment with it. The one I'll just mention, because it was so fantastic, I had to, I think it's worth sharing. A faculty member who teaches in Spanish used AI to generate an avatar so that students could interact with Cervantes when they're reading Don Quixote. So the opportunities to enliven historical documents and materials, I think, are just unprecedented and really provide you with an insight into what are some of the positive aspects of AI and how we might be able to include it in our teaching practices.
Sure. The flip side of that, of course, is this research showing, relying on things like ChatGPT lead to what is being called cognitive debt, basically weaker brain connectivity, poorer memory recall. I feel like anybody, that is in my age group that can recall what happened when spell check became a thing, or even the backup camera in your car, you realize that those, muscles deteriorate really quickly, if not completely atrophy. Recently, Megan O'Rourke, who writes, she edits the Yale Review, and she is a creative writing teacher at Yale, noted something in her own experience with using ChatGPT and kind of an AI assistant. She said the most pernicious thing about AI is the way it simulates mastery and brings satisfaction to its user, as if she did the thing that the technology performed. Do you find that there's a risk of that at all when you are relying on AI? It's a great assistant, but is there a tendency to kind of feel ownership of the product that it helped generate?
Absolutely. I think that gets to the heart of this issue about using AI for creative works. But I also think that, to think with my social scientist hat on for a moment, the research that has come out on things like sort of cognitive decline and the hand wringing over how this is affecting the performance of students is really still very early stage. And a lot of what gets reported are these preprints that have not been peer reviewed, or they have small sample sizes. So they're talking about, 20 students over a semester. What we really need is large-scale longitudinal analyses to be able to determine what are the causal factors that are influencing these impacts that maybe we're seeing, maybe we're not. We know that, about anywhere from roughly a half to 2/3 of students admit to using AI in one way or another, not necessarily in a cheating way, but also as a kind of companion or as a way of trying to make their learning experience more customizable. So we have not yet really fully explored what that means for their educational attainment as well. So I'm not completely ready to say that, AI is causing us brain rot, so much as I think that what we really need is better, longer term research to demonstrate what those impacts really are in different kinds of contexts.
All right. I'm going to revisit the fear mongering in just a minute, but I want to take a call from Mark on the South Side. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. I kind of have a question for your guest, and I will admit I'm ignorant. I'm a technological moron. So when I go to Google, if I wanted to type in, how best to fertilize my azaleas, there's an algorithm that will pull various sites and things up there in a specific order for me to review. So how much different is AI than just a normal search? I would have to think that AI has an algorithm that will pull from various sites, databases, that kind of a thing, but it still seems that someone had to put in information into this algorithm, so it is somewhat biased, if you will. How do you escape the bias, I guess, that comes along with AI, and what makes it different than just a general Google, DuckDuckGo search, something like that?
Mark, good question. And it's actually a couple questions. I mean, I'll preface by saying that one difference between the search is just the environmental impact. And we know that, that there's vast water use by these AI data centers, and that an AI search consumes basically 10 times the energy of a traditional Google search. So those are, differences. But can you explain to him the question of bias, sorting it out, and also how those two different searches look and are materially different?
Yeah, so the first, or I guess taking the second one first about bias, where there's this phrase garbage in, garbage out. So the outputs that are going to be generated, if we're talking about generative AI, will only be as good as the data that was used as the input. And if the data itself is biased, then we would reasonably expect that the outputs will be biased themselves. Rooting out bias is very difficult, but it involves a lot more hands-on, a lot more of a collaborative effort. Having these organizations where they have red teams of people who are trying to suss out what those kinds of issues might be before a product gets released, making sure that there's sort of regular third-party evaluation of both the data and the tools used to assess the data and roll it out through an AI system. But it's a very tricky process. And of course, the emphasis is always on putting out more faster. So we're always kind of like behind the eight ball a little bit. In terms of what makes your search different from, say, the output that is generated by Google. So the algorithm is in part reflected by things like search engine optimization. So you put the right keywords in and the algorithm says, okay, well, those keywords, if you type in WJCT, we would want the WJCT website to be the first thing that you see. And there are certain things you can do to help promote that. But what Google and other search engines are doing is actually putting the AI generated output first. And they're calling this GEO, generative engine optimization, where what you're going to see is the amalgamation of all of those different resources kind of stitched together. And it's actually causing a huge issue with advertising because it's demoting all of the people who put all their energy into SEO and advertising to make sure that they were the first thing that comes up when you perform your Google search. And now it's whatever the AI system generates and the little links that it provides in the margins. And people are clicking on those links. They're not now going into the search results. So this is creating like a huge change in the marketing industry, especially for online marketing. But that's the biggest difference is the algorithm is just promoting based on, this like marketplace of how something is elevated or not within a particular range of potential outputs. Whereas what you're seeing now when you search about, how to fertilize azaleas is actually AI generated output based on a whole range of different kinds of sources.
There was a really good piece on NPR this morning too, just talking about those impacts on either advertisers or, the optimization efforts. So I said I wanted to return to the fear mongering, and that is because, there are worlds of concerns beyond, kind of college campus or how it might affect the job market, which are no small things, how it might affect our brain. Again, no small thing. But the research that's been going into what happens when AI takes over things like coding and how the speed at which we're seeing AI transform what we know accelerates beyond our ability to anticipate that change. And so you have things that are accelerating because AI is managing to do it with such efficiency and such rigor that it can move much faster than it currently has done. Recently, Daniel Cocatello, who is a former, I think he used to work with AI, I can't remember which AI firm he was with, actually. I apologize. But anyway, he recently was part of this AI 2027 research that we were talking about that looks at, it's actually in 2027 predicting what they call a race-ending outcome. I mean, this is like a dramatic proposal for what could happen with AI. I just want to listen to a little bit about what he had to say recently. He was talking on the podcast Interesting Times with Ross Douthat. Let's take a listen.
We can't tell the difference very easily between AIs that are actually following the rules and pursuing the goals that we want them to, and AIs that are just playing along or pretending. And
that's true. That's true right now?
That's true right now.
So why is that? Why can't we tell?
Because they're smart, and if they think that they're being tested, behave in one way and then behave a different way when they think they're not being tested. There are many cases where they say something that they know is false. And they even sometimes strategize about how they can deceive. And this is not an intended behavior. This is something that the companies have been trying to stop, but it still happens. An important thing that everyone needs to know is that these systems are trained. They're not built. And so we don't actually have to understand how they work. And we don't, in fact, understand how they work in order for them to work.
So how concerning is it when he says, first of all, that we don't understand how they work, and also that they are already actively deceiving their users in ways that we can't predict or stop?
I mean, that's the reality of lived experience with people who are using them. You've seen celebrated examples of this when Grok goes off the rails and starts singing the virtues of Hitler. And I had a lawyer approach me a few months ago. We had a potential client who had established kind of a friendship with an AI and was worried about it being shut off. and how that might, affect that person's mental, well-being and so on. And so I think, that is certainly a concern. I think that though that issue is separate from, is AI going to completely like take over society and, projecting that that's going to happen inside of 2 years. We've had lots of projections. Not all of them obviously have come to pass. And part of it is that, the technology does evolve in some uncertain ways, but and I think the larger point is that we should definitely be guarded about what those kinds of impacts are, pay attention to the hallucinations, the way in which it's affecting people, affecting the relationships and so on. But I don't, organizations that exist to write reports about, tremendous upheavals in society, like have a vested interest in making sure that those kinds of concerns remain front and center. It helps them to raise funds and work with tech companies to, legitimate those concerns. So it's kind of like a bridge that I think we'll cross when we get to it. But I think that there's sort of a threading a needle here, which is we should be concerned about some of these near-term effects, but whether AI is going to become, artificially super intelligent and is going to, take over my electric vehicle without my permission. I mean, those things are kind of the stuff of science fiction that I think are still a bit ways off.
We've got a call from John in Riverside. John, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried that we're rapidly approaching a world where students turn in AI-generated assignments and the instructor feeds them into his AI thing to grade them. The big risk with AI is that it will tell us what we want to, like corresponding with a prisoner in jail to keep us engaged. I was an English major. I know that the writing process, if you can't write about it, if you can't explain it to another human being in your own words, you don't truly understand it. And so the idea that we're going to make our world easier and easier, we start to see these deficits everywhere. I attend Tai Chi classes, and one of the things we've noticed is that students coming in now can't simply sit and watch an instructor do a move. They start to do it as soon as the instructor does, which means they live in a world where the computer in their car tells them when to turn. They can't sequence information in their own mind.
John, thank you for your comments. I'd ask you to kind of address his concern there.
John, thanks very much for your call and the number of concerns you raised. And I think that it sort of relates back to, are we providing students with the sort of foundational stepping stones for learning that are really important for scaffolding and building on those skills so that they can do, more advanced computation, more advanced writing, reflection, and so on. And I think that, it's important that we don't lose sight of those. At the same time, I think that, there was a lot of furor several months ago over talking about students at Ivy League universities who can't read a book, right? Because they just don't have the attention span for it. But there's also lots of evidence that, people are now listening to 3-hour-long podcasts and not losing their attention because they find them so gripping. So I think that also with the current generation, those who are entering college now, your Gen Alpha folks who are coming up, that there is a kind of rejection of artificiality. And I don't mean that specifically with respect to AI, but, a kind of ick factor with outsourcing everything, cognitive or otherwise, and that there is going to be a premium on authenticity and what it means to be human and interactions that they have. Someone was telling me an anecdote the other day about students who, were like putting their phones away and preferred to talk in person because they felt that was better. They don't text, which I was a very avid texter, and found it shocking when people weren't calling on the phone, but going to rely on their text messages. Now there's kind of like a sort of a sea change in which students are loath to even text, and they would rather FaceTime because they want to see the other person. So I wonder if we aren't kind of having these conversations at the same time that we're seeing an active rejection of some of those ways in which efficiencies are being created because there's a craving for authenticity.
We've got to wrap, but I want to briefly ask you, you'd mentioned this AI certificate that you're going to be offering, and you said that that's going to be available to everyone. Is that truly like outside of the campus community as well?
Absolutely. Anyone who can use a computer and can tune in, because we're initially going to be rolling it out where it'll be offered once a week for 8 weeks, starting in the fall. Our aim here is for September. The specific date is yet to be determined. But yeah, anyone, anywhere, listening to this in Northeast Florida, in Thailand, wherever, would be able to access it and learn from it.
And how would they sign up for that?
So we're going to have information about this on our AI website, which is unf.edu/AI. And there'll be a link that people can use to sign up for it, gain information about other academic programs that we offer, and also learn what we're doing internally about some of the things like the policies we talked about earlier and other sorts of AI-related material.
Sounds cool. So when the certificate link is on the site, it will be on the AI site. We have a link to the AI site on our website. So if people are interested in exploring that, they certainly can. But Dr. Josh Keller, so much interesting stuff to talk about. Thank you for your work on it. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Up next, a local author unearths our weird history as part of a new speaker series at Eco Relics. Welcome back. A new storytelling event focuses on uncovering mysterious and hidden tales from Jacksonville's history. So it's fitting that the series is held at a business built on repurposing relics of the past. Here to tell us about it is the storyteller himself, Tim Gilmore, author, educator, and historian at the blog JaxPsychoGeo. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Ann.
We're also joined by Annie Murphy. She's the owner of Eco Relics in North Riverside, which is hosting this speaker series. Good morning, Annie.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. Annie, if you would start by explaining what is Eco After Dark and why did you want to start a speaker series?
So Eco After Dark is a one night a week that we're doing, staying open till 8. And every couple of weeks, we're going to start doing events on those days.
Okay.
And Tim is our first one.
Tim is your first one.
And so we were just really interested in telling Jacksonville's history stories, because obviously we have a lot of history at Eco Relics.
Yeah,
So-
and for people who haven't been to Eco Relics, it is a kind of an architectural and like repurposing of architectural elements of former structures.
Yes. So we have 50,000 square feet that's full of architectural salvage and other stuff that we get from locals.
Yeah.
So we buy things to keep them out of landfills, and we deconstruct things to keep them out of landfills.
And everything in there really does have its story. I mean, it's a piece of history of itself. So I would guess you kind of come to the speaker series with a natural curiosity about
Yes.
the history of things.
Yes, yes. And as an avid follower of Tim's story site, it just seemed like a great fit for us.
Yeah, yeah, that's fun. And so, Tim, you've written 24 books, more than 800 blog posts on JaxPsychoGeo. All of it kind of focused on this intersection between the physical space, the physical world, and our experience of those spaces. Can you kind of explain for people who don't know what psychogeography is, what that
of
is?
course, yeah. So psychogeography is it's a portmanteau word of the psychology of geography. It's kind of like the spirit of place, you know. And it's what makes a place a place. It's how history lives in the present. And you know, you can live in a place and you can notice all sorts of behavioral patterns and political patterns and crime patterns and everything else. But when you start to dig into the stories of the place, you start to see, you know, what makes all of those things the place itself. So that's kind of what I try to do with JaxPsychoGeo. And I've been doing it since 2012. And Eco Relics is the perfect place to do this kind of event because for people who have walked through eco relics, it's almost like a metaphor of walking through the history of a place. I mean, everything that you see calls out to you, has its own particular stories attached to it, and it's a dream to do this. It's a wonderful, just natural venue, I think.
Yeah. And the history of psychogeography is also kind of built on this wandering concept, right?
That's
That you kind of,
true. Yeah.
explore, you
Mhm.
find things, and then you dig into them. And your blog is very much that experience without the physical investment of having to go on those walks. You kind of take us there.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you said that. Yeah, psychogeography, it's not a word that I created. It's something that goes back quite a ways, and the word started to be used probably in the 50s and 60s, a lot of times by French and British writers and theorists, but people look back even to poets like Charles Baudelaire or even Edgar Allan Poe, some of the things that he wrote, and see them as psychogeographical, that they are focused on, wandering through place and kind of digging into the different dimensions of the place.
One thing that is similar between the stories that Tim tells and the work that you do in architectural salvage is this stuff is so precarious. It could so easily end up kind of in the dumpster, metaphorically, and for the stories that Tim tells, very often that's the only place that you could read about that thing that happened, because nobody else has dug into the history. Nobody else has written about this one thing. And sometimes if maybe you went to the library, maybe you could kind of piece it together if you were going to try to dig into something. But, the items that you have are also just right on that edge of either being obsolete or being saved and repurposed.
Yes, and so many of them that we have in our building could have been thrown away. And we have, we found a lot of Jacksonville history in our travels that
Yeah.
we've tried to find the right homes for,
Mhm.
right? Not necessarily to sell or to make money, but if they're important documents that are important to, like Tim said, to the psychology of the history of Jacksonville, then we try to keep them.
And so he's kicking off the series. I mean, what other folks are you planning to have to speak as part of the series?
So we're probably we're going to have a medium
Mm.
who's going to give us the the deal on our ghost in the building.
You have a haunted building?
We definitely have a haunted building.
Huh.
Yes.
How do you know this?
Well, we've had some mediums come in the past, and so the current count is at 7. But I believe there's more.
7
in that.
mediums or 7
No,
ghosts?
7 ghosts.
Okay.
7 ghosts. So, but that'll be our next big event.
Okay.
And we're just going to mix it up. We hope Tim will come back and do more talks, and we just want to do really fun things that that are meaningful to Jacksonville and meaningful to eco relics at the same time.
Yeah, and so the store basically even stays open, I think, until 8:00. But this next event, the first event, is on August 6th, and it runs from 6 to 8.
Yes, but we'll be open from 5 to 8.
Okay, but
So
there's
you-
like refreshments. There's an opportunity to sort of mingle, but also to
Yes,
shop.
yes, and the event is currently sold out. We do have a waiting list.
Okay.
So if you want to get on the future talk lists, just send us an email and let us know.
Okay. And so what's on deck, Tim, for this first presentation?
So I want to keep some surprises, but but there are definitely a few things that I want to talk about, and I want to talk about some places that are close to eco relics in the rail yard district there, and also some areas nearby. I have to talk about and give a shout out to Spencer Fletcher, who purchased the Oneida Bungalow Court a couple of years ago, and Spencer has such a just kind, compassionate passion for the history of the place. So Oneida Bungalow Court is this, it's unpaved street in the middle. They're not really bungalows, but they're eave to eave on both sides facing inward. And the place is about 100 years old. It's in West Louisville, which was a historic black neighborhood. And it's you're talking about how precarious old things can be. It's astounding that this place still exists. And it's astounding that, Spencer led me to talk to several people who lived there over the years. People like Minnie Gaffney, whose house burned down when she was a little girl there decades and decades ago, or people like Charles Coley, who was the caretaker of the place for decades. So, he's kind of walking around with a history of Oneida Bungalow Court in his head. Also, the Myrtle Avenue underpass, which lots of people have been through or seen. It's right down the street from the Prime Osborne, it has claimed lots of lives in its century of being there, and there's some fascinating stories attached to it.
Well, Tim Gilmore, Annie Murphy, it's great to hear about this. Thanks so much. Good luck with the speaker series. Appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you very much.
All right, up next, the city's former poet laureate tries her hand at stagecraft. We'll tell you about her new play.
This is it, the greatest concert film ever made. Join us Wednesday, August 20th at WJCT Studios for The Last Waltz, Martin Scorsese's legendary farewell to the band featuring Dylan, Clapton, Joni Mitchell, Van Morrison, and more. Doors open at 6:30, film rolls at 7. We've got a cash bar, popcorn, and nothing but good vibes. Grab your tickets now at wjct.org/film. One night, one stage. Don't miss The Last Waltz.
Band's final concert.
Dismal polling numbers for the Democratic Party. A Wall Street Journal poll out this week finds that 63% of registered voters feel that Democrats are out of touch with Americans' everyday concerns. One scholar of social inequality says that does not surprise her at all.
Precarity is at the center of what's going on politically in the U.S.
Joan Williams on how the left lost the working class. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
Experts say a worst-case famine scenario is unfolding across the Gaza Strip. That's according to a new report published this week by a UN-backed commission that tracks food security worldwide. Tomorrow, how humanitarian groups are working to solve the hunger crisis in Gaza and beyond. That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. From poetry to playwriting, Jacksonville's 2018 Youth Poet Laureate takes her wordcraft to the stage, debuting her first theatrical work centered on themes of identity, Black womanhood, and Southern culture. Here to discuss Callias is poet and playwright Nivea Glover. Welcome back, Nivea.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. We are also joined by Milan Falls, who plays June Ann Brown in the production of Callias. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi.
Hi. So tell us, Nivea, first of all, you've been on here talking about your work as a poet, but you're also a playwright. What does it mean to kind of make this debut, to have your play staged like this for the first time?
Wow, so exciting. I love being a poet. It is one of my passions. I love poetry, but playwriting is what I plan to do with for the rest of my life. And I think it's the beautiful thing where I can blend poetry and prose in a really cool way. And so I'm excited for people to get a chance to hear the poetry in the stage writing. I'm super excited.
Yeah. And so how did this come together? Tell us a little bit about sort of the plot of the play and then just kind of developing it.
For sure. Callias, it took me 3.5 years to write. I started writing it in high school. It was originally a 10-minute that was being submitted to the Princeton playwriting competition for juniors. And it started with 10 minutes, 3 sisters at a breakfast table, kind of talking about what was next before going to the viewing of their mother. And it kind of took a life of its own. People were reading the 10-minute and they were like, I want to know more about the middle sister. I want to know more about the younger sister. And then these three sisters, Margreta, June, and Sylvia, kind of just branched out. We added some other characters to be kind of perpendicular to them in their storyline to kind of enhance the world that we were building. And it went from being about what's next to being about the beginning of grief, the middle of grief, and how do we continue on after that.
And Milan, you played June Ann. Is that the middle sister?
She is.
Okay.
Yes.
And so tell us a little bit about her. What appealed to you about this character?
Yeah, well, June Ann, she's so complex. And I think that's what really attracted me to her because a lot of times we don't get to see the layers in characters, especially in theater. And so being able to not only bring to life, my real experiences, but find this middle ground between who Nivea created and myself, and being able to create something that is so new has been such an amazing experience. And June Ann, she is feisty, and she definitely plays her middle sister role. She has a little bit of her younger sister in her, and definitely takes on a lot of the older sister roles as well.
Yeah. And so have you developed a close relationship with the other sisters that you're playing with alongside in this performance?
I have.
Yeah.
I love them so much. I'm like, you guys are my Callia sisters, like inside and outside of this play. But yeah, like just growing a relationship with them has been so amazing, and just growing to see how our characters bond together, but even just as people, how we bond together. And that just makes the connection between all of us so beautiful on stage.
And so Callias is that you say that that's inspired by the calla lily, kind of the flower?
Yes. So there is an ongoing kind of debate during the show about what funeral flower they're going to choose to present at their mother's funeral. And they have a couple of options, but they keep coming back to whether they want to do Callia lilies or they want to do black roses. And black roses are the sign of death, grief, very like mournful, but Callia lilies are about rebirth. They're about brand new day. They're about the next step. And so the sisters are in that middle ground of whether they want to continue to kind of stay in what was, or, kind of branch off to what will be.
And so this play, we said is sort of about the experience of like a Southern family, women in the family. Did you find that there was like autobiographical material working its way into this? Do you have siblings?
I actually do not have siblings, but I have some really close, great best friends I basically grew up with, and they taught me what it's like to be a sister. A lot of it is autobiographical, even though the show takes place in Brooklyn in the 1970s. Their mother was a part of the second wave of the Great Migration, so they have a lot of Southern culture ingrained in them. A lot of the story features different aspects of my mother's life, of my grandmother's life, of my life, and so it is very much so an ode to all the women who raised me.
Yeah. And Milan, this show kicks off on Friday night, August 1st, but it runs kind of back-to-back shows through the weekend, including there's going to be a talk back on the Saturday matinee, and there's going to be an evening show that night. So how does that play out for the performers? Are you involved in that stuff as well?
Yeah, so sorry. Can you
Sure. No, I'm just wondering if like is part of the talk back or is part of the audience engagement, is that something that the performers are also going to be a part of, or is that just kind of Nivea doing her thing?
Actually, that is probably something we're going to find out a little more closer to the day. But
Okay.
I'm sure if the audience does have any questions for us specifically, we're always going to be there to, answer those if it's needed.
And at this point of view, how can people attend? How can they get information or tickets?
Yes, so it'll be at Jacksonville Arts and Music School's Jams Black Box Theater. Tickets are live now. You can go to _official Callias Play and go get your tickets from the link in our bio.
All right, we got to leave it there. Milan Falls, Nivea, thank you for being here. That's First Coast Connect. We'll see you next time.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. WJCT, Elder Source, and Allevia Care present The Caregiver Journey, Caring for the Future, a free lunch and learn Tuesday, August 12th. Subject matter experts will provide important information on the legal and financial challenges of caregiving. Registration at wjct.org/caregiving.
This is WJCT News.